Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 694 with Kulsoom Klavon. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Kulsoom Klavon. Kulsoom, I gotta ask, are you feeling unstoppable today?
You bet.
Yes, that is what we like to hear. So, Kulsoom Klavon is the Vice President of Curation at the Food Hall Company, and today we're here to discuss this unique perspective, or your unique perspective on food and beverage pertaining to the food hall world, which is kind of a mystery for a lot of people because it's kind of a re-emerging segment within the industry. So, can't wait to dive into it. But just to dive in a little bit more about who you are, Kulsoom is responsible for selecting the food and beverage concepts that go into food hall companies. Locations, you have two locations right now, one in Plano, Texas, and another one, we're sitting at the Plano, Texas location called Legacy, correct? And then we have the Nashville, Tennessee location that's going to be opening this fall?
Correct.
Already open.
Yes, third quarter.
Beautiful. And basically, you're the person that goes out and you find the talent, you're paying attention to the trends, and you're curating this cultural experience for your guests. Accurate?
Very accurate.
Awesome. So we're going to kind of just dive into the world of food halls today. I really have no idea exactly what we're going to discuss, but I'm really excited to learn more. But before we get into today's topic, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
What I've got is something that my mom always told me when we were growing up, and that was, if you follow your passions and make a career of it, you'll be happier than and better than anyone else at what you do.
Ooh, so how does that resonate with you?
Oh, it's always resonated with me, and I've always followed my passions. You know, you might not think that making a career in food and beverage could be, what it is if I had not believed in that throughout my life.
What exactly is your passion?
My passion is food, anything and everything related to food and related to beverage, and it has been since I was about 4 years old. Growing up overseas, I was born in Pakistan and grew up all over the world, and really got tremendous exposure to various cultures everywhere, and of course their foods, and just fell in love with that entire side of the business.
Awesome. So when did you first get attracted to, as far as working in the industry? Like, where did your career start?
My career actually started in hotels. I actually went to Cornell University undergrad, and then when I graduated, I went to go and work in a hotel as an AGM and then as an F&B manager. I did that for about 3 years, loved every bit of it, went back to get my MBA at Cornell, and then launched right into food and beverage again with American Airlines, and that's why I moved to Texas.
Okay. So reflecting back at your career, any key mentors, any key people that stood out who really influenced who you are today?
No doubt. After American Airlines, I moved on to TGI Fridays, and my VP of marketing there was a gentleman by the name of Tom Koenigsberg. And what I really appreciated about him was his balanced approach to everything. His analysis always included both the consumer perspective and the ops perspective, and I think it's really important to take both perspectives when you're in the food and beverage business.
Beautiful. So give me one specific nugget, reflecting back at your time with him. One thing, whether it's a scenario that played out, something that he did that you observed, or something that, I don't know, maybe it was like below the radar, like a between the lines that you figured out just from observing him. Did anything come to mind just reflecting back at this time?
Well, just generally speaking, in terms of the functional area that I was responsible for, which was R&D, you're charged with being incredibly creative and innovative. And so I worked with a team of chefs, and they came up with some wonderful items. We would present those items, and each time he would give us great positive feedback, but he would always come back to, well, how will they execute this in the restaurant? So it really taught me to think through all of the various steps involved in delivering something, and I finally realized that on a go-forward basis, everything you do, I mean, yes, it needs to be innovative, but it needs to be balanced with, something that's executable.
Is it practical?
Is it practical?
Are we turning over all the stones? Like, this might be a great creative idea, but like,
can it be replicated consistently day in and day out? Because if it can't,
how much is it going to cost? Are we going to be able to turn a profit on this, or
exactly,
is it going to be
exactly
out of reach?
Every aspect of that item he evaluated, and I really learned a tremendous amount from him.
I love it. So what specific experiences before the food hall world, before working here at Legacy, set you up for this role as curator? How do you even qualify for what it is that you do? It's a very unique role within the hospitality realm.
I think I think my diverse background and my global perspective, and the fact that the breadth and depth of my food and beverage experience across a broad range of different industries has made it very, very relevant and appropriate for me. I have tremendous food knowledge and expertise, and at the same time, I have a formal education from a business perspective. So I'm really able to bring that balance. And in the food hall business, it's not just about tremendous food and the right operators and the right quality, but it's also about it being a win-win for everyone involved from a revenue standpoint and from a profitability standpoint.
Yeah, and I hope to get into that. So you started with working within hotels. You went to Cornell, you're in hotels, and you transitioned to American Airlines, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious. I feel like that being able to travel specifically, paint the picture for what you're doing with American Airlines.
So at American Airlines, I was manager of menu design and product development, and that was the team that was responsible for developing all of the in-flight food and beverage service for all of American Airlines flights throughout the world. So we had different teams. The European team was responsible for developing meals on European flights. We had a Latin American team, and I was responsible for leading all of those teams and flying all over the world and working with local caterers on what that in-flight service should look like from a food perspective.
So there's a whole nother set of like hoops you got to jump through, reflecting back at your professor and what you learned from him. Like, is this achievable? Is this a great idea, but can we do it on an airplane?
Exactly,
So,
in a really super tiny space. Can
Exactly.
we replicate it? And taste buds change when you're operating at 40,000 square feet. So how will the food manifest itself at that at that level? So
And are you trying to represent the cultures too that you're flying to, and
Yes.
kind of make that a part of the experience for the guests?
You are, yes. So I mean, you have sort of your core concepts, but then you're integrating what we would refer to as a destination feature. So wherever you're flying into, you want to instill a little excitement. So you would feature ingredients from whatever that destination was for flights inbound and outbound.
So what skills are you leveraging that you picked up then now?
Just the incredible understanding of food from all over the world. I mean, I really have had exposure to...
What a great job if you love to travel and eat food, right?
Exactly, and I love both. Just having grown up all over the world and loving food, that was the perfect job for me right out of school.
I think that was kind of my dream. So I was a commercial pilot. That was kind of my dream when I got into the aviation world, to be able to go anywhere. Like, that's ultimate freedom. And then I got into the industry and I realized that it's not quite that simple. But I'm right there with you. So what was next after American Airlines?
After American Airlines, I made a move to TGI Fridays.
That's right.
I actually learned a lesson at American, which was I really and truly love food, and they determined that after 7 years within food and beverage, I needed to move to another functional area to expand my experience within American because of the pool of folks that I was in. And so they moved me to Advantage Strategy, and I was the director of business strategy for Advantage, the frequent flyer program.
Okay.
And while that was fine,
There's
it
no
was
food.
really boring, and there was no food involved.
right.
So I knew I needed to make a change, and that's how I decided to go on to TGI Fridays.
So why TGI Fridays?
TGI Fridays was back in the day sort of the quintessential definition of, the Fern Bar, casual dining. It sort of exemplified casual dining at the time, and it was sort of the first in the industry, if you will. So for me, it was the gold standard, and it was an opportunity to really learn as much as I possibly could about the restaurant industry in the context of what was considered at the time the gold standard.
Yeah, and I hate to date you, Kulsoom, but when are we looking here? Is this like...
Oh, we're talking about probably somewhere right around 1998.
Okay, so this is... TGI Fridays started in Florida, correct?
The first one, I believe, was in New York.
New York?
Yes.
Okay, where did you come on? Where were you?
In their corporate office.
Okay.
Which is based in Dallas, Texas.
Okay, got you. So in what fashion did you come on with that?
I came on board as their senior director of research and development.
Okay.
So I was responsible for food and for beverages there.
And what I'm trying to do right now for the listeners and for you is basically paint a picture of, if you're interested in being a food curator, I mean, this is kind of a path you can take.
Yes.
Being a research and development, it seems like that's kind of like your research and development and curation of cultures, and not just food, but like all that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So with TGI Friday, any key lessons that kind of set you up for what you're doing now? We're going back almost 20 years or over 20 years, but...
I mean, again, always sort of, keeping the guest in mind, but keeping a practical eye on everything that we're doing. That was really something I learned firsthand at TGI Fridays, just because it was such a large chain and you really couldn't afford to do something that was super creative and out of this world, because you knew it couldn't be replicated consistently. So it really taught me the discipline to approach everything with balance.
Got you. Any other key experiences from your time after TGI Friday to getting this opportunity with Food Hall Company that set you up for success?
Well, you know, my next step after TGI Fridays was 7-Eleven.
Okay.
And it was very interesting because at the time when 7-Eleven approached me, I thought to myself, what kind of food could 7-Eleven possibly have to sell? You know, I'm not interested in this opportunity. It's not food and beverage. And eventually they came back and convinced me that, in point of fact, they wanted to be in the food and beverage business. And so they made a case, and I ended up joining 7-Eleven, and it was absolutely fascinating to look at fresh foods in the context of a convenience store. And, you know, learned a tremendous amount there, because there, for the first time, I was not only responsible for the creative side, R&D, and the culinary team that was developing all of these fresh sandwiches and salads and so on and so forth, but I was also responsible for the category management team, which is the business side, the P&Ls. And so each category manager is running a different business. For instance, the category manager of sandwiches is running the sandwich business from a business standpoint, and then I have chefs working with them on developing those products. So it was a tremendous experience for me.
I can only imagine.
To work, you know, at 7-Eleven, honestly.
So are you, I mean, I don't think many people realize the reach of 7-Eleven. They're all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah, I spent some time in Thailand, and literally where I was staying, this fishing village / like kind of vacation village, there's literally a 7-Eleven like every 1,000 feet on the beach.
Yes.
And I got really familiar with their sushi hand roll things for some reason.
Yes.
But I never knew the reach that 7-Eleven had. So did you have to, the point that I'm getting at, did you have to kind of go into the different markets, or were you just in the U.S. market, or were you going to Asia and all these other places?
So I was in the U.S. market, but we did travel to Japan to really experience 7-Eleven, you know, on its home turf. In Japan, 7-Eleven is viewed as your local grocery store, as your local restaurant. I mean, people stop in 3 times a day, and they have deliveries 3 times a day in Japan. And so the vision was to sort of, you know, bring that philosophy to the United States and apply it to the 7-Elevens in the U.S.
Okay. And I know there's a couple other stops that you have between 7-Eleven and here. Anything worth bringing to the surface before we transition on today's topic, which is food halls and what you guys got going on here?
I think the only other thing I'll mention is, you know, certainly my time at Rave movie theaters was tremendous from an experience standpoint as well, because at Rave movie theaters, not only did they have restaurants inside the theater, so this wasn't in-seat dining, this was actually full-serve restaurants inside the theater before you actually started watching a movie, and then they had concessions, and then they had branded QSRs like Nathan's Hot Dogs. And so I was responsible for running 3 very different types of food and beverage businesses under the context of movie theaters. And that was certainly very interesting, because you're working with QSRs, you're working with full service, and then you're working with concessions where you're moving through thousands of people within the span of half an hour before the movie starts.
So what unique skills did you develop with that you're leveraging today?
Truly, you know, an understanding how to work with licensees, because those QSR concepts were licensed. So I learned a tremendous amount there, and then just in terms of concessions, how you really have to be built for speed in order to move as many people through that line as possible before they go and take a seat.
The movie starts, right?
Otherwise, you know, beyond that, you've lost that opportunity to generate revenue.
Perfect. That's a good point. I never even thought about that, because you get those people that are going to be like, well, I don't want to miss the credits. I don't, or not the credits, but the what do they call it? Sneak peeks. Previews. Previews.
Yep.
I never even thought of that challenge. The rest, or the cinema experience, whatever you call it.
Yes. And then beyond that, just quickly, you know, moved on to Dave & Buster's. And Dave & Buster's, for me, the beauty of that, it really does tie into food halls as well, just because Dave & Buster's is not just about being a restaurant and being a bar, but it has that entertainment aspect to it as well, which is games. So now you're starting to move into experiential.
Okay.
And that's exactly what food halls are all about, the experience. And for instance, the food hall company and Legacy Food Hall, we integrate all those elements as well with respect to food, with respect to liquor, beer, wine, and with respect to entertainment.
Yeah.
And Dave & Buster's had that entertainment aspect with the games, so it really starts tying together.
Well, it's after getting this out of you, it's makes so much more sense now. Like the unique experience that you have that sets you up to be able to do this very unique job of curating restaurants and putting them into a space to create. It's about the food, the culture, and the experience, which we're going to get into too.
Yes.
So I think now is a good time to take our first break to thank our sponsors, and we'll come back to talk about the history of this food hall that we're sitting at today, Legacy, and the food hall company, how it came to be. I'm really curious about that, so we'll be right back. This episode brought to you by MarginEdge. Never deal with a paperwork nightmare again. So we're back, and first I'm curious. I want to talk about the history of the food hall company, but what do you know about the history of food halls in general? Like what was the trigger that brought this resurgence back with food halls? Because they've been around. Anybody who grew up in the 80s and the 90s remembers going to the mall and there being a bunch. It's essentially that's a food hall, a little different.
Yes, very different actually, but similar in terms of the principles, which is having a variety of different food under a single roof.
Exactly. So when did this resurgence start? Like what triggered this food hall as we know it today? So
food halls have been around in Europe for a very long time.
And
how long? Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't recall how long, but perhaps back, through the 1980s.
Gotcha.
And I could be off on that. And our founders, Randy DeWitt and Jack Gibbons, were actually traveling back from Russia, and they happened to stop in Amsterdam. And they asked locally where they should go to have a great meal, and they were referred to a place called Food Holland. And it turned out that was a European-style food hall. Mm-hmm. So they were, of course, fascinated by it. They came back. They thought, what a great idea, and sort of filed it away. And then the developer of Legacy West.
When did they go through and have this experience? How long ago was that?
It was some years ago. I don't recall exactly when, but it is something that they brought back. And then, the developer of Legacy West actually came to them and said, I've got this space. It's 55 to 60,000 square feet. What do you think you can do with it that actually creates an anchor destination for us? Because, in theory, we all know that retail is, not as successful as it used to be, and in essence, it's dying.
Yeah.
So in theory, it was about what can be, built here that actually creates the destination, and then folks go to shop retail.
I was really curious about that. I'm happy you brought it up first, and I didn't have to ask. So is this resurgence of the food hall kind of a reaction of the market where people don't go out and shop anymore, but we have the space still that we need to put people in? So what's going to be the draw? Well, what's going to get people out of their houses to go into these vacant spaces?
Exactly. And so the goal was to create this experiential destination anchor that drives traffic to the development.
Yeah.
And then drives business to all of the retail that's contained within that same mixed-use development. Okay.
So give us a little background on Front Burner Restaurants, because the gentleman you just mentioned, that was their original business. These restaurateurs with Front Burner, they had 14 locations or something like that? I think I remember.
So they
14
actually
unique concepts.
They have been responsible for launching multiple concepts. They're an incubator, and so they've launched concepts like Velvet Taco,
which is here in the space.
Yes, 60 Vines is a concept of theirs, full service. They have Whiskey Cake. They have a number of different concepts. They're very, very creative.
And how long has their restaurant group been around? When did they come on scene?
I don't know the year.
No, that's okay.
Do not know the year.
It's been a while, though.
It's been a while, and they're very well known in the industry.
So 14 unique concepts. I think somewhere around like 200 or 300. Did I read like 300 total locations with their concepts, or did I make that up?
But no, that's possibly right. Again, I don't know the specifics.
Your focus is on the food hall.
My focus is on the food hall side of the business, but that perhaps that's right.
Okay. So when did the conversations, like they went over, they experienced the food hall on their travel. They tucked it away. When did that food hall conversation start to bubble back up? When this gentleman approached them saying,
Yes.
we have this opportunity, we have
Yes.
this space?
Yes.
When was that?
And I was not with the company at the time,
Okay.
so I can't tell you when that was, but I know that Legacy Hall opened in 2017, and, so that conversation could have been maybe a couple years prior to that.
Yeah, I would assume it took a few years to get a project like this.
2 to 3 years, perhaps, prior to 2017.
So 2013, 2014.
Could be.
Which makes sense, because around that time is when you started seeing the food halls in America start to pop up. You had Italy, which is, I think, one of the original, not the original, but they were early on. They followed that Mario Batali's concepts. They were kind of at the leading edge of the food halls in the States.
Yes.
So when did they reach out to you, and why did they reach out to you? What was that conversation like? Or did you reach out to them?
So it was funny. I actually reached out to them because I was fascinated by the concept.
Okay.
And I had visited it, and I thought, this is a really interesting concept. And I, quite frankly, had not seen a food hall prior to Legacy Food Hall after it opened. So I reached out to them, and they immediately responded and said, come on in and let's chat. And we had a number of great conversations, and they said, you're the unicorn we're looking for.
Yeah, well, I think because of what you just shared with us, like this unique background, right? Like of curating, getting the experience with, you mentioned the Dave and Buster's experience in the licensing of the contracts with the cinemas. And
yes, and then the international experience with all the different cuisines, et cetera, et cetera. So it all sort of came together perfectly.
Interesting. So one of the things I'm curious about, and this is kind of a side topic, but you mentioned that there was this void in retail when the internet emerged and people weren't going out to fill these spaces. Do you think there's going to be a reaction where if people start going to all these food halls, like there's going to be less people going to restaurants? Do you think we're cannibalizing our market a little bit?
I think it's a different consumer, or it can be a different occasion.
Okay.
There's full service restaurants for a certain type of occasion, and there's food halls for a different type of occasion. So it's all, I think, occasion driven and experience driven as well. It depends on what kind of experience you're looking to enjoy.
Okay. So what are some of the benefits? So somebody who's listening to this, who maybe there's a food hall going up in their community, maybe they already have a restaurant that's open and they're looking to add channels of revenue.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for that person who's looking to get involved in a food hall? What do we need to know?
Well, the beauty of a food hall for small operators is the super low cost of entry.
Okay.
I mean, there's very little capital required. It's extremely low risk, and it's a phenomenal environment within which they can sort of test a concept if they want to try and incubate a new concept, or it's a great environment to establish a brand identity and then expand that brand identity.
Okay.
So it's phenomenal for small operators.
So you said it was a low overhead to get involved. Can you give me a ballpark of like on the low end, on the high end to get involved?
I mean, it's going to range depending upon how much space you have and the equipment. So it's sort of hard to give you a perspective, but it can range anywhere from $40,000 to $120,000.
Which put up against a couple $1 million or even a $500,000.
Exactly.
Is a much more attainable, reachable.
Yes.
So what percentage of your vendors here would you say are people trying to test a concept, or it's their first brick and mortar and they're trying to scale into something maybe on their own freestanding, versus people who are already well established within the community, who are already the big dogs, the big swingers, that are just looking to expand their footprint?
I would say that the minority are the bigger dogs that are already established, and the majority are people who are trying, a concept for the first time, or are moving from a food truck into a brick and mortar.
So you see like a 60-40 split, 70-30 split?
It's probably a 70-30 split, to be honest.
I'm actually happy to hear that you're you're using the space to give people opportunity.
Absolutely.
To break into the market. So what things do we need to consider that aren't considered? We were kind of highlighted some of the benefits. If there's more benefits, I don't want to cut you short. Is there anything that I cut you short? Anything that was on the tip of your tongue as far as the benefits of being involved? You mentioned the low entry. You mentioned the low responsibility, because you're kind of like renting. Really, you're not. If anything breaks, I'm sure
it's also very manageable. I mean, you're working with a relatively small space. You're responsible for just running your concept. We are responsible for everything else, which makes it very, very easy.
What do you mean everything else? What's the everything else?
So the everything else is, we are responsible for running all of the bars and all of the common areas and all of the busters. And so we're, in essence, taking care of everything that's outside your specific stall. And what you're responsible for as an operator is your food and your labor.
Taking the order, cooking the order.
And cooking the order.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What about delivering the order?
It's counter serve.
Okay.
So it just makes it a very easy model for most people to adapt to versus full service where you're employing hosts and hostesses, and you've got back of house staff and front of house staff. It's a very simple, streamlined, easy to manage model.
Okay. What about the agreement? What's that contract between food hall creator, yourself, the curator, and the actual vendor? What's that operation contract look like? Is it? I'm sure they have to pay something to be here, right? How does that look?
It's a license fee arrangement.
Okay.
And so everyone pays a license fee that's a percentage of gross sales.
Okay.
And that's, in essence, how the model works. So the beauty of that is if you sell more, you pay more. If you sell less, you pay less.
Okay.
So, again, that works very nicely because, in essence, it's a sliding scale, so to speak.
Yeah. So you're not – it makes it more attainable again.
Yes.
So – What's a normal percentage that is?
It varies. I mean, there's so many variables involved that it's difficult for me to share a normal percentage, to be honest.
I've heard somewhere around 20%. Is that accurate?
It can range anywhere from 15 to 25.
Okay.
Let's just say that.
So 20% is pretty accurate, right down the middle.
It's just as accurate as 15 is or 25 is as any other number in that range.
So since this is kind of a new business model, newer. What's the feedback on how that works? Is there good and bad feedback, or what's the general feel there?
So from our perspective, all of the feedback that we've received is tremendously positive. I mean, we have, so many prospective operators contacting us constantly about potential opportunities. I mean, so clearly it's a success.
Yeah.
People want to be in the food hall, and our operators here are very, very happy with Legacy Food Hall. We have a number of operators who have asked for a second stall.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
that really demonstrates the success of the model for us.
So, So one thing we've learned on the show that's super important is that when you're going into a space, if you have the operations agreements or the contracts that you have to think about, this is a really unique situation. So what unique things do we need to think about working into a contract if we're looking, maybe we're in a different market, different city, looking to get involved in a food hall? How can we protect ourselves as the operator when we're looking at the contract, and vice versa? Maybe we're a curator and we need to think about things to put into the contract to protect ourselves from the operator. You know what I'm saying? What unique elements to a contract are involved in this situation that we need to consider?
Well, I mean, the contracts are just really unique in general because they're license agreements.
Yeah.
So, our contracts have so much information in them, but they're designed to benefit both parties. I mean, if our operating partners aren't successful, we're not successful. So it's a very balanced approach, and I think it takes the operator's best interests in mind, and of course, we do our best to protect ourselves if an operator should fail as well.
What's unique about a license agreement versus other agreements?
What's unique about a license agreement is it's typically short-term, and it gives you tremendous amount of flexibility. So that's nice, again, for both parties, because, if you have somebody coming in that's never had their own concept, they try it out, let's say, for instance, and they're not comfortable, they don't, they decide they don't really want to
or it's a bust,
or
nobody
it's a
likes
bust,
it, yeah.
It's very simple for them to exit.
So when you say flexible, you're talking about time.
Yes.
So you're not locked into a 1-year contract. Is it by month? Is it quarterly?
It's typically a 3-year contract, but there's just a lot of flexibility built in if people decide this isn't the right model for them. 3
years is usually pretty short compared to, I think average would be anywhere from 5 to a 10-year lease, right?
Yes.
So that's pretty cool to know.
And we're, and to be honest, we really listen to our partners, and so we're very reasonable. This isn't about taking advantage of people or moving people out. I mean, everything we do is done with our collective best interests in mind.
What do you mean moving people out?
Stall operators out who want out.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're not motivated necessarily to do that.
Yeah.
We do want a certain amount of natural turnover, just because that provides us with new news.
Keeps you fresh.
It keeps us fresh.
Yeah. So I'm really curious. Do you have a success story, like of somebody who maybe had been working in the restaurant, maybe was a chef de cuisine
Yes.
or a sous chef that wanted to break away and start something new?
Yes.
Give us an example of a
Yep.
success.
So a perfect example is of our sushi stall downstairs, RU694.
Okay.
The gentleman was a chef with steel, a well-known, local restaurant. He's been in fine dining. He's done it all from a culinary standpoint. He also happens to be a grad of UT Austin in statistics.
Nice.
But he's always wanted to have his own place. And he was so very persistent with me. So one key point to note, if you're persistent, the opportunity will come your way.
Yes, it is.
When I first started with the food hall company in 2018, he had approached and said, hey, I'm really interested in doing a sushi concept. And we didn't have an opportunity at the time, but it was a gap in our
Nice.
product mix. So he just kept checking in with me. I said, keep checking in with me, Steve. Keep checking in with me.
How long did it take him to get a yes?
It took over a year.
Wow.
And finally, I said, looks like we have an opportunity. Let's do this. So he opened Horu Sushi. It's one of our top stalls in terms of performance, and so successful, in fact, that he said, Kulsoom, if there's another opportunity, I'd love to have another stall. There's another opportunity. It opens on Tuesday.
Same concept?
Nope. It's
Okay.
it's hibachi and ramen.
Interesting.
So he has now a second stall here that he's opening next
That's
Tuesday.
awesome.
Yeah, so it's fantastic.
So I think you kind of just like hovered over a topic that might be of value, persistence. But what else do we need to know if we're trying to break into a food hall? Being somebody who's that says yes or no to these people, what do you like to see when somebody approaches you to pitch you a concept to enter a food hall?
Yeah. So what I am looking for when I am, evaluating different potential partners is the overall balance that they offer. There are a lot of celebrity chefs who feel that they know it all, and yet they may not necessarily be a good fit for us. There may be great operators who, quality isn't necessarily their strong suit. So what we're looking for is balance. We're looking for food passionate entrepreneurs that can execute consistently, holistically,
Yes.
and without compromise. And so the key is balance for us. We need operators that know how to deliver high quality, freshly prepared foods consistently, but they also, have to be operationally savvy, because a food hall environment is so different from a brick and mortar. You're working in this 250 to 450 square foot space, and the foot traffic is unbelievable. So factors like speed of service, throughput, operational efficiency all become critical to your success.
Are there like boxes that you absolutely have to check when you're deciding whether to say yes or no to somebody? Like, are there like the mandatory, like what are the most important boxes that you're checking when you're approving or disapproving somebody?
First of all, the quality. The quality of the product is by far the most important piece of it for us.
Okay.
And then, the second piece of it is, can they execute it consistently day in and day out with 35,000 people a week coming through our food hall?
Okay.
Or in Nashville, it's 75,000 people a week.
Wow.
You can't be in a position where you're taking shortcuts, and the quality has to be there every day.
How are you
without fail.
checking that to make? Like, are there checks and balances you put in place as a curator to make sure that those standards were the same on like day? We'll say day 30, because it takes
Yes.
some time to accelerate into and get your groove going.
Yes.
And how do you make sure that after day 130 it's the same? Are you tracking this stuff?
So what we are doing is we work very closely with our operators. So let's say, for instance, they're making a change to their menu. That's something that has to be approved by us. So we are actually sampling new menu items that they're adding to the menu. They're deleting menu items, and then as we travel, to our food halls, we are consistently trying food items throughout the course of the year at every stall to ensure that everything is on track and consistent. We also monitor social media. I mean, we have various analytics to help us keep up with, how our stalls are performing, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and we keep up with those metrics.
Okay, cool. Okay, I think we're at a good spot to take our second break. We'll be right back to kind of look at this. I think right now we've been looking at it from more of a restaurant owner perspective, but now I'm kind of curious. I know there's some people out there that are interested in starting their own food halls, and I think they don't even know where to start. So I want to focus on that next. One more quick break. This episode brought to you by MarginEdge. Never deal with a paperwork nightmare again. So we're back, and up to this point, we're going to be kind of talking from like the restaurateur perspective, trying to get into a food hall and leverage the space that's provided. But I know there's a few people out there that are really interested in starting food halls. But operationally, like, what are the things that need to be considered that might not be so obvious? Like in a restaurant, we have the executive chef, we have the general manager, we have the manager, we have the line staff, we have the DO, we have the director of marketing. Yeah. Like, what are the positions that are unique, or the roles that are unique to the big picture with a food hall?
Yeah. So quite frankly, that's a great question. And we believe, the food hall company believes, that we're very differentiated from any other food hall company, generically speaking, for a number of different reasons. Starting with the fact that, we're self-funded, we design and develop our own food halls, we curate our own food halls, we market our own food halls, and then we operate our own food halls. So we have a vested interest from start to finish in the success of our food halls, which is not typically the case.
What is typical?
What's typical is a food hall may be built by a developer, and then there's a third party that might be managing it, or very often, one of the stall operators within that food hall is responsible for turning the lights on, and somebody else is responsible for turning the lights off. Okay. There's no on-site staff, there's no hands-on active management of the business day in and day out. And that is something we do that we believe nobody else does.
So what happens, what's the byproduct of what you just described, where you have contracts all over the place coming together?
Right. So the beauty of it is, because we have an operations team in place, once we've curated a food hall, we continue to operate it. So we have a general manager in our food halls. We have operations managers. We have a beverage manager. We have an entertainment manager. So we have a number of different roles, and we have a dedicated marketing team to each food hall who is, focused on driving traffic to that food hall. So that team is working day in and day out to operate the food hall as a whole. So when you have all of these different and diverse stall operators, they have a resource to go to, as do our guests if there are issues, which you won't find to be the case most anywhere else in another food hall. You don't know who to go to if you have an issue. Do you go straight to the stall operator? There's no general manager.
Yeah.
If you have issues, who do you speak with? And so we have all of that because we're vertically integrated.
Yeah, and I think when you're vertically integrated, everyone's pulling in the same direction.
Yes.
There's one overarching mission. There's one overarching set of values. There's one, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
So you're not divided. You're not just contracting things out. Everyone's kind of showing up to collect their check and doesn't really care about what's happening over there. That's not my lane. That's not my problem.
Yes,
right?
It's a very close-knit environment, and everyone is dependent upon everyone else for their success.
I love it. So what are some of the unique challenges that you're faced with when trying to bring all these people who have these different businesses under one roof? Because in a restaurant, we have like a certain mission statement, values, vision, something that we're trying to obtain with our brand that's aligned to what we're trying to do. But then right next door, on one side of us, there's a whole set of different like values and visions, and on the other side, there's a whole new, and like you're surrounded by all these different companies. Yeah. But collectively, there's an overarching culture for the food hall. So how do you draw those lines, or how do you get people to come together for a common, separate cause that is the food hall?
Well, that's typically on the front end of the process when we're curating. We're having those kinds of conversations. We're really getting to know the concept and the operating model and the operator and the individual's approach to food, etc. So once they're in our food hall, we know that they meet our established standards, and therefore there should be no challenges with respect to them running their business and having any conflicts with anyone else who's running a business. We also make a very concerted effort not to overlap types of cuisines so that people aren't directly competing with one another and cannibalizing, that there's plenty of room for sales growth for everyone, because otherwise you're just cannibalizing sales if you have 2 pizza concepts or 2 burger concepts.
Yep.
So again, making certain that they can be successful as well.
Okay. What about like we mentioned something earlier about staying fresh, right? And you want there to be a certain level of turn.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What happens when people don't want to leave? Have you had this issue yet where there's just you reach maximum capacity, everyone's kind of squatting in their respective space, but maybe the trends are changing?
So there will always be a natural amount of attrition for many different reasons, whether it's, issues with health, or somebody wants to go to a brick and mortar now that they've, a full service brick and mortar now that they've incubated their concept and it's a success. So there will always be turnover. For us, ideal turnover is about 10 to 20% because that allows us
per year?
Per year.
Okay.
Because that allows us to keep bringing in new concepts and whatever is most relevant at any given point in time from a food standpoint.
That makes sense. I mean, when you have 20 units here, right?
21.
21 units.
Yep.
So I mean, at that rate, I mean, how many new spaces are opening up each year, would you say?
So anyway, I mean, on average, it'll probably be anywhere from 2 to 4.
Okay.
2 to 4.
Do you wish it would go faster, or do you like that pace?
I think that's a great pace because you're keeping some stability, some concepts in place, but then you're constantly integrating new news, which always drives interest and drives traffic.
Okay. Anything else that I haven't asked you up to this point that you think is super relevant that we need to know if we're either A, looking to be involved putting our restaurant in a food hall, or B, looking to create our own curation of restaurant operations?
The only point I'd like to make is if you're truly interested in being in one of our food halls at the food hall company, when you complete that application online at our website, make certain you're as thorough as you possibly can be and take the time necessary to be as detailed as possible, because I'm not in a position to actually meet with everyone face to face. So the way I filter a lot of potential concepts is by the amount of information you're providing me on the front end.
Can you give me some examples of specific details you're looking for?
So let's say, for instance, it's a hibachi ramen concept. I'm just making that up. Part of the application is, tell me about your menu. What kinds of food items are you going to sell? What's your pricing going to be? What kind of equipment do you need? What's your unique proposition? A lot of applicants will take a very cursory approach to that and just say, I want to do Japanese food. If you actually walk through the kinds of foods, that's going to get me engaged.
So the more specific.
The more specific you are on what it is you want to do, if you had a food stall at our food hall, the more interested you're going to make me. Okay. And therefore, the more likely I am to be in touch with you about what your concept.
Okay. One thing that I did not get into earlier, but it just came into my head now, when you're moving into a space and you're a new concept entering a food hall, you're putting up, I think we identified anywhere from like 40,000 to like 150,000 or whatever it was. Am I covering the cost of my equipment up front, like my range, my ovens? Like, how does that work?
The models vary. We have different models depending upon the operator's capabilities. So it can range. It can range.
So, but I'm assuming that if it's like a custom piece, that you won't be able to repurpose in another concept that goes like, I mean, if it's an oven, that's pretty standard. But if it's a wok, like a special like hibachi like flat or like whatever, I'm assuming that you're going to make them kind of probably be responsible for that, because they're likely going to take it with them, right, when they leave.
They're likely going to take it with them if they brought it.
Okay.
So that's the way it works. But again, as I said, it's a model that has so much flexibility to it that in some cases the equipment is already present if it's a second generation stall. So if you're coming in, whatever equipment is there, you can use and then add whatever else you need. Yeah. In cases where it's first generation, like Nashville, we're doing the build out, and we're working with those stall operators on the specific equipment that they need in that stall. So the model varies depending upon first generation, second generation, capabilities of the operator, resources of the operator, etc.
Okay. One last thought that just came into my mind. I think I can try to find it. It left my mind because I was trying to listen to you at the same time. It escaped me. I can't remember what it is. Oh, wait, I get it now. So, what opportunities are out there right now in the food hall world? Like, we're at a certain point with the food hall like evolution. Like, what's the next evolution with food halls? Like, what are the leading brands doing that the other brands aren't doing?
I would say it's what we're doing, because we consider ourselves to be the gold standard, and that is this fully integrated approach that's based on the experience and really, sort of food theater, the art of cooking on display, and tying that in to various other events and programming events to constantly drive interest and traffic and engagement.
So it's not just you ordering food at a bunch of options. It's like there's that and then.
Food is food is the foundation, but then there's more.
Give me some examples of the and thens.
The and thens are beyond food. There's the bar side of the business. There's the special events side of the business. There's the catering side of the business. There's the corporate sales side of the business, and there's the entertainment side of the business and how we program live music and free concerts and tie-ins to Mardi Gras and Chinese New Year, and have movies during the week, and summer play days because kids are out from school. So it's sort of integrating all those aspects under a single roof to create that experiential.
It's more of a community
yes.
that's going on here.
Yes.
That's interesting. What's the future look like? What's the next evolution? If we're here now.
Right. I mean, from the food hall perspective, I can't say what the evolution is at this point. I honestly don't know at this stage. It'll be very interesting to see what happens next.
So what's the future for a food hall company look like?
I think the future looks tremendously bright. We have, a great number of different opportunities. We have developers coming to us constantly because, as I said before, we are considered to be the gold standard. And so, the opportunity for us is limitless. I will come back to the question you just asked about what does the future look like for food halls. I think for the most part, many food halls will no longer exist in the long term if they solely rely on the traditional model, which is put in a few stalls that sell food and,
that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah. Why is that?
Because consumers are looking for an experience. They're looking for a destination. They're looking for more than just food. They're looking for, as you mentioned, sort of a place where they can come together and experience something social and connect and interact and, have a degree of adventure associated with all of it.
So you're
and
not
experimentation.
You're not just curating food concepts.
You're curating
a culture
and an experience.
Yeah, an experience. I love it. I love it. This has been great. Anything that we did not discuss, now's the time to get it out.
I think we covered most of it.
We did cover a lot.
Yes.
And this was a unique interview for me, so thank you for all my weird questions. This is the first time I've had a food hall operator on the show, so thank you for being the first there.
My pleasure.
And one question I want to start asking all my guests, or I have been asking all my guests, the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. So how have you transformed? Who are you today versus the woman you were when you maybe got started here or in the industry?
That's a challenge for me to articulate that.
Yeah, it's not an easy question.
It's really not an easy question. I can just say that I have always been someone who's been interested in learning as much as I possibly can about food and beverage in its various shapes and forms. And this opportunity, once again, has enabled me to learn so much more and really educate myself on the business. So that's what I take away from where I am today.
Is there one operator, and this is another question I ask all my guests before I wrap up, is there one operator that you respect and admire and is like the gold standard to like what the industry should look like? Who's the first name that comes to mind when I say that? Call them out to be a future guest on this show. You don't have to make an introduction or anything like that, but I put them on my radar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I come back to, front burner from that perspective, and just Randy and Jack in terms of what they've done with their restaurant concepts. I think they're amazing folks, and they've done tremendously well, and they're known for innovation. And
Randy and Jack.
Look
out, Randy and Jack. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And maybe we can talk to them about some of the questions that are more pertain to starting a food hall.
Yes, that would be perfect, actually. They can give you that background better than I can.
Randy, Jack, look out. I'd love to get you on the show. And I think that's it. How can we connect if we want to maybe pitch you an idea for coming into one of your food halls? And you're expanding throughout the country, so maybe you should let my listeners know where you'll be.
Yes. So we'll be in Nashville next, and then beyond that we have several projects in the pipeline that we can't announce at this point in time. But
Can you give me like northeast, southwest?
West Coast, East Coast, South, and North.
Okay.
So, throughout the U.S. opportunities. If you're interested in an opportunity in our food halls, then just go to our website at the Food Hall Co. and there's a place where you can complete an application, and I will be the person that will respond.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your knowledge today. I'm always afraid to say your name because it's so unique. Kulsoom, I'm saying it correctly, right?
Yes, you are.
There is no questioning. You are unstoppable. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're awesome.